We don't know what's on the other side of the Bitcoin singularity.
Yeah.
So people are buying it. It creates infinite demand in with Bitcoin, and we see that with a few people that are simply just going to keep buying it no matter what, and that's spreading all over the world, and it leads to the hyper Bitcoinization. It leads to a global Bitcoin standard, and it leads to the collapse of fiat money and kind of the abandonment of gold in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So what's on the other side of the Bitcoin singularity? We can only speculate. In my view, it's the big global orgasm of hard money, which means all of our subconscious and unconscious minds fuse together in what I call the monetary G-spot. And that's what's on the other side of the Bitcoin singularity. That's how I see it. That's what I think will happen. We're going to have a love explosion. So you had commodities were big in the 1970s. Then starting with Reagan and Thatcher, you had paper money took the place of commodities from the early 1980s up until 2022. So that's a 42-year period when paper ruled over commodities. And in 2022, now we're back to commodities ruling the global economy. And the ultimate commodity is Bitcoin. You know, it's the fastest horse in the race, as Paul Tudor Jones has called it. That's still true today as it was 3 or 4 years ago. So if you love commodities, you are going to be ecstatic about Bitcoin because it's the ultimate synthetic digital commodity. It has the added attraction of it makes people insatiably curious to own it. It makes it creates infinite demand amongst human beings. So there's a psychological commodity crossover Bitcoin and the human psyche. People, once they start buying it, like Michael Saylor and others, they can't stop buying it. So that's a psychological aspect. Well, The Economist magazine put out a story, put out a cover this week, basically that says the Fed has failed. Right? So now for year after year, for the last 20 years, 25 years, through Greenspan, Bernanke, Janet Yellen, Jay Powell, there's been this huge global coordinated talking point agenda that central banks are infallible. We've had some famous magazine covers before. After the 2008 crisis, we had the Committee to Save the World, which was Greenspan, Larry Summers, and Bob Rubin. We have this constant lionization of central bankers as heroes, that money printing and keeping rates artificially low is heroic behavior by the Mandarin kings that run the central bank. And now finally the Economist has admitted that it was a huge canard. It was a failure. It's a gigantic failure, as we've been saying now for almost 20 years, that you cannot print your way to prosperity. All of the, Stacy, for years people have been saying that the amount of people being pulled out of poverty around the world is in the hundreds of millions and billions. And I would say, well, if it's all fake money, then it's a Ponzi scheme and it will blow up. So now we've got millions and billions going back into poverty, especially in countries like the UK, where they're saying that it's been flagged as really the worst in the Eurozone. They're looking for a recession coming very soon. They've got energy insecurity and food insecurity. In the United States, food insecurity is happening for real, and it looks like it's going to happen in a big way. In all over Europe, you've got food insecurity. So the fiat money decades only worked if you could the principal way the fiat money fraud worked was to hide true price discovery in the commodity sector. So energy and agriculture and metals, price discovery was kept artificially low through money printing. And just a couple of months ago, we have a big commodity producer out there in Eurasia that said, you know what? I think we're going to call time on this. Now we're entering a period of commodity price discovery where commodities are going to go up, 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 up. And everybody tied to the paper money world will become increasingly more impoverished. Well, the difference is in the old days under mercantilism, countries were competing with each other. And but the new phenomenon, really, starting with the 80s, was the coordination of the fraud on a global basis.
True.
And so that extended the fake bond rally for decades beyond its natural business cycle. But now it's at the end. So now all the central banks will collapse simultaneously, which is we've never, ever seen anything as globally catastrophic. Now, the fly in the ointment always has been. But this is really, and we've said this before, the ultimate reed in the wind, the litmus test, the canary in the coal mine, the one data point you look at to find out exactly what's going on is the Japanese yen. So the Japanese yen, because of quantitative easing, which was invented in Japan, Japan has always been what's called a funding currency. It's where every single country and every single hedge fund goes to borrow money at virtually 0% and then invest it immediately into a higher yielding currency like a euro or a dollar, and you capture what's called the carry trade. You could get 2 or 3%, which doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're borrowing it close to zero or at effectively zero, and you can borrow infinitely, then you can turn that 3% into an annualized rates of return or 50 or 60%. Now you're doubling your money every 2 years. Okay, so that's Japan's role, has always been the go-to place to borrow money. And right now, the yen is seemingly out of control on the downside, which means that the ability to maintain that global go-to open spigot of free money to fund this global Ponzi scheme, at the moment, it appears under extreme stress. They'll say, you have $10,000, we're going to give you $100,000 in CBDC, but what they're not telling you is that within 6 to 9 months, you'll have zero.
Yeah.
The purchasing power will be zero. It'll be effectively zero. So it's not a bailout. It's not a bail-in. CBDC is just an outright confiscation. Just wholesale confiscation, and that's the end game. So that's what they're teeing up right now.
That's what they're teeing up. Fortunately, Max and I will hopefully have escaped by then completely to El Salvador, and we will be like in Bitcoin country. And you can't. We
need to bring this entire set with us.
Yeah, you can't say we didn't warn you, right? Like, what have we been doing for the last 15 years? Okay. Why do you think they disappeared all our content in the last few months? Because they know it's coming and they don't want you to fucking watch that shit that we provided for you.